Hello and welcome to the Street Crime UK YouTube channel. Please don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Today we look at an ex-squaddie who armed one of the UK's most feared criminals, who photographed as he handed over a Debenhams bag containing a firearm surrounded by unsuspecting shoppers. At the High Court, Andrew Stephen, 53, was jailed for 10 years after purchasing more than 100 deactivated weapons to arm dangerous crime groups for as little as £600 a time. It was written that the shocking extent of his criminal empire became clear after the exchange was captured on CCTV outside a busy McDonald's in Glasgow. As Stephen left the Courier, Kenneth McMullen got in a taxi and travelled from Jamaica Street to the city's East End. There he was met by William Patton, who was waiting on the pavement outside his Ford Street flat. But all three men were blissfully unaware Police Scotland's Organised Crime and Counter-Terrorism Unit had been monitoring their every move. 3 minutes after the taxi pulled away, armed officers swooped on the property and made a discovery which helped smash one of the country's most audacious criminal enterprises. Detective Inspector Graham Lindsay said, "Inside the Debenhams bag was a deadly present, a .38 revolver and 7 rounds of ammunition." What was unique about Stephen was that he provided 7 rounds of ammunition to a gun that fired 6 rounds. So in essence, he provided his customer with a test round. To date, 101 weapons reactivated by Mr. Stevens, dating back to 1993, have been recovered across Scotland and as far south as Brighton. And it is understood major crime groups run by drug barons such as the late Jamie Daniel and Roy Dunstance were among his clients. Operations Santis was launched in May 2014 when a reactivated .38 revolver was recovered from a house search in Drumchapel near Glasgow. Ballistics experts at the Scottish Crime Campus in Gartscosh later established it was part of a series of handguns which held a common forensic link. Detective Superintendent Jerry McLean said of the OCCTU said, "Potentially there was somebody out there who was providing a specialist capability to organised crime groups." What our forensic partners were saying is that there are at least 4 weapons that had a unique ballistic signature. How they had been reactivated was common to one person or one method of reactivation. Crucially, all 4 also had the same DNA profile, but it was not on the police database. The National Ballistics Intelligence Service database was consulted to map the recovery of every revolver in the UK, which bore the same hallmarks as 4 which had already been linked. The process identified more than 30 similar weapons dating back to 2007. It also revealed 4 manufacturers were preferred by the mystery armourer: Smith & Wesson in USA, Taurus in Brazil, Astra in Spain and Rossi in Italy. Police would not reveal how Mr. Stephen was initially brought to their attention, saying it could compromise intelligence sources. But they began monitoring him while he was unemployed and living with his long-term partner in a sheltered housing complex in Ayr. Detectives began to examine every aspect of his background and established he had lived in the same north of Glasgow catchment area where the weapons had been recovered. Going further back, they discovered Mr. Stevens left school at 16 and joined the army in December 1984. Mr. Stevens was discharged almost 4 years later at his own request and spent time working as a security guard in Maryhill. D.S. McLean said there was nothing remarkable in his life that suggested how he had this capability, but he fitted the profile and he was in the right area. By the time we started to look at him, he was staying with his partner down Ayrshire. The next phase in the investigation involved monitoring his every move. D.S. McLean added, "We used a range of covert tactics, which included surveillance. What that continued surveillance showed us was that he was operating from his home address and making criminal contacts in the main in Glasgow city centre. Those meetings were facilitated by what were apparently shopping trips where he would be accompanied by his partner. Police started watching Mr. Stevens and the team did not have to wait long to get a result. The following day, they observed him travelling into Glasgow city centre for a meeting in McDonald's on Jamaica Street with Kenneth McMullen, Dean Kimmins and David Patterson, who were separately jailed for 5 years. All three were known to police, and this confirmed the assessment that Mr. Stephen had criminal links. But detectives still had to determine was whether Mr. Stephen was a lone wolf or part of a wider network. The full scale and scope of his activities was also very unclear. Mr. Stevens travelled by bus to Glasgow with his partner. This time his business was conducted with Mr. McMullen outside a McDonald's in the exchange that led to the swoop on Mr. Payton's flat. Forensic experts then linked the recovered .38 weapon to others that had reactivated by Mr. Stephen. Despite the breakthrough, detectives realised they had to keep Mr. Stephen in play, but they didn't have the long to wait. They watched as a friend gave him a lift to the Golden Jubilee Hospital in Clydebank. He entered the hospital in possession of 2 carrier bags. 20 minutes later, he handed a pink bag for life to Mr. Patterson, who then got into a taxi and headed to Glasgow. His journey was abruptly cut short on Great Western Road. Detective Inspector Lindsay said, "As a result of the search, we identified another deadly present, a .38 revolver and 21 rounds of ammunition." This swoop also shed light on the events of the previous day when the surveillance team observed Mr. Kimmins, who ran his own organised crime group, travelling to Ayrshire to meet Mr. Stephen. After a meeting in Matalan, the pair went back to Mr. Stevens' one-bedroom flat. D.I. Lindsay added, "We believe the deal to bring him a firearm to Glasgow was done then." The recovery of 2 firearms linked to Mr. Stephen just 3 days apart intensified the focus on his home and paved the way for his arrest just 5 weeks later. D.S. McLean believes the scale of this case is unprecedented in Scotland. He said the geographic range and capability of the organised crime groups he was supplying was indiscriminate. The potential to cause damage, harm people and perhaps even take lives at the hands of organised crime groups was significant. Through working with partners and through forensic services, the investigation was able to identify Mr. Stephen at a very early stage, understood the scope of the network and take action that potentially saved lives. So what are your thoughts about Andrew Stephen and how he went on to supply past criminal organisations with deadly weapons such as the likes of a .38 revolver? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.